Welcome to our deep dive. We're going to be looking at what a second Trump term could mean for higher education in America.
Hmm.
You've sent us some really interesting articles and some opinions from experts, so
Yeah.
let's jump right in.
Okay.
I have to say, I was pretty surprised by the election results. Trump defeating Harris to
Yeah.
become the 47th president.
Really shook things up.
It did, big time.
It did. Yeah. And I think, for higher ed, the implications are huge. We could see changes to funding, student loans, even academic freedom.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of, I don't know, anxiety, you could say. Ted Mitchell
Right.
from the American Council on Education, he said he was very anxious
Yeah.
about what this all means for universities.
Mm.
So he seems to see this as a direct threat.
Hmm.
But then you have people like David K. Wilson,
Yeah.
the president of Morgan State University.
Hmm.
He's calling for resilience. Like, let's turn this adversity into opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I think both reactions are understandable. I mean, there's a lot at stake.
Yeah.
Mitchell, he's probably anxious about funding, changes to funding
Well,
autonomy.
yeah.
But then you have Wilson talking about resilience,
Yeah.
right? It's a reminder that even in uncertain times, you can adapt.
You can adapt, yeah.
You can innovate. You can even thrive in the middle of change. There's always room for transformation.
I was really struck by Michael Roth,
Hmm.
the president of Wesleyan University. He's not wasting any time. You remember during the campaign,
Yeah.
Trump promised to deport undocumented immigrants.
Right.
And Roth basically said, not on my watch.
Right.
He said publicly that Wesleyan will not cooperate with any federal efforts to deport their students,
Wow.
faculty or staff, based only on their citizenship status.
That's a bold statement. It really speaks to the values that are, central to this whole debate. We're talking about the lives of over 407,000 undocumented students
Yeah.
in higher ed. And so Roth is saying, we're going to protect our community.
Wow.
We're going to be inclusive even if the feds don't like it.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on. Speaking of potential conflicts, let's talk about this Project 2025 thing.
Okay.
It sounds like a movie title, but it's the Heritage Foundation's plan to the Department of Education. And from what I've been reading, it's
It's pretty radical.
pretty radical, yeah. Project 2025 is about reshaping the Department of Education, like really reshaping it, maybe even getting rid of it.
Yeah, dismantling it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key things they're talking about is shifting the student loan programs back to private banks.
Wow.
Imagine the impact if private banks are suddenly back in control of student loans.
Yeah, that's a little scary.
Higher interest rates,
Yeah.
stricter lending, less oversight from the government.
And there's talk about limiting the department's role. What does that even mean? What functions would they cut?
Right.
What happens to educational standards,
Mm.
equity initiatives, research funding?
These are great questions. And honestly, some of the names being floated as potential education secretaries, they don't exactly inspire confidence. When it comes to maintaining the status quo, you've got Glenn Youngkin. He campaigned against critical race theory.
Right.
Christopher Rufo, who's all about fighting against woke education, it seems like.
Big changes.
A big shift in priorities.
Yeah, and of course we can't forget Betsy DeVos,
Oh, yeah?
education
Yeah.
secretary during Trump's first term. She was reported as saying that the only way she'd take the job again is if she was coming back to dismantle the agency. I mean, that
Says it all.
says it all. But let's look beyond the sound bites for a second. What are the philosophies behind these people? Do they really think dismantling the Department of Education will lead to better outcomes for students? Or is there something else going on?
Yeah, it's really important to look at their motivations and what the consequences might be. I mean, think about Title IX, for example.
Yeah.
Under DeVos, in Trump's first term, we saw them trying to narrow Title IX,
Right.
roll back protections for transgender students.
Mhm.
With her potentially back in charge, those efforts could
Yeah, those could be intensified.
intensified. Absolutely.
And you know that issue of transgender athletes? It was everywhere during the campaign.
It was a big one.
It's clearly a top priority for them. It seems pretty likely that a second Trump administration would try to reverse Biden's Title IX rules about transgender athletes' participation in sports.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that mean for transgender students? How would it impact their sense of belonging,
Right.
their mental health, their educational experience?
It's important to remember that these aren't just abstract policies.
Right.
These policies have real effects on real people's lives.
Yeah, and it's not just about the students themselves. It's about the message it sends
Yeah.
about our values as a society. What does it say about our commitment to inclusivity and equality if we're excluding certain groups from participating fully?
It raises really fundamental
That
questions
says.
about the purpose of education. Is it just about getting knowledge and skills?
Hmm.
Or is it also about building a community, a sense of belonging, respecting everyone?
That's a really profound question. And it's one we'll keep exploring as we look more deeply into the potential impacts of a second Trump term on American higher education. Next, we'll be looking at the potential effects on research funding, international collaboration, and the balance between academic freedom and political pressure.
You know, it's amazing how one election can have such a ripple effect on higher education.
Yeah,
Classrooms, research labs, everything.
it really does. It feels like a seismic shift. One area that I'm worried about is research funding.
Okay.
With all the talk about cutting spending and shrinking the government, I can't help but think about what'll happen to places like the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health.
Right. Well, the Heritage Foundation Project 2025, they're targeting both the NSF and NIH for some pretty serious restructuring.
Hmm.
And it's not just about leveling off funding, it's about deep cuts and a fundamental change to their missions.
So instead of saying funding might level off, what are we talking about? Like a 5% cut, 20%. I need to understand the magnitude of what we could be facing here.
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure right now.
Right.
But some people are predicting cuts between 10 and 30% or even more,
Wow.
depending on the program and how the budget negotiations go.
Wow.
Imagine a 20% cut to the NIH budget.
Yeah.
That could mean thousands of research projects are put on hold or just canceled completely.
Yeah.
Delays in developing new treatments.
Yeah.
A real chilling effect on scientific innovation.
That's scary.
Yeah.
It seems to go against what the ambassador to China has been saying
Right.
about how important it is for us to understand China,
Yeah.
especially for national security.
Right.
If we're cutting research funding, especially research that involves collaborating with other countries, how can we expect to keep up with China's advancements in science and tech?
Yeah. It's a real contradiction.
It is.
On one hand, you have national security experts saying, we need to be working more with China,
Right.
especially when it comes to science and tech.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, you have people who just see China as competition, economically,
Yeah.
militarily, and they want us to be more isolated.
Hmm.
And this whole tension is playing out in these discussions about research funding
Yeah.
and international collaboration.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say which side is going to win.
It's a tough situation for sure. And it's not just about China either.
Yeah.
It's about the whole global research network. American universities have always been these centers for international collaboration.
Yeah, they attract the best researchers in the world.
Yeah, but if we cut funding and make it hard for foreign scholars to work here,
Right.
we're going to lose our edge.
Exactly. We could end up with a brain drain.
Yeah.
Top talent going to other countries
Yeah.
that are more welcoming.
More supportive.
Yeah, more supportive of scientific research.
It's such a short-sighted approach.
It is.
With potentially really bad long-term consequences.
Yeah, for American innovation
Yeah.
and our leadership in the global knowledge economy.
And it's not only scientific research we need to think about.
Right.
There's been a lot of talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion programs,
DEI.
DEI programs in higher education.
Right.
And it seems like they might be in the crosshairs of this new administration.
Yeah, that's a real concern.
Yeah.
Some conservatives see these DEI programs as pushing a woke agenda.
Right.
They see them as unnecessary, even harmful. They argue that these programs favor some groups over others
Right.
and cause division instead of unity.
Yeah.
It's very possible that they'll use the Office for Civil Rights to investigate
Yeah.
and maybe even challenge these DEI programs,
Even
if the Department of Education itself is restructured.
So they might keep the OCR specifically to target these DEI initiatives. It seems kind of
It's ironic.
ironic.
Yeah. It's ironic, but it shows how seriously some people see these programs as a threat.
Yeah.
They're willing to use any means necessary to get rid of them.
What about the chilling effect this could have on universities, though?
Yeah.
If they know they're going to be investigated for having DEI programs, they might be less likely to implement them in the first place.
Right.
It creates this atmosphere of fear,
Fear and self-censorship.
which goes against everything academic freedom and open inquiry stand for.
Exactly. That's the danger.
Yeah.
And it's not just about DEI programs. It's about any kind of speech,
Right.
any research that those in power might consider politically incorrect or offensive.
Yeah. J.D. Vance,
The new vice president.
he hasn't been shy about how much he dislikes universities and what he sees as their liberal bias.
He said, if any of us want to do the things that we want to do for our country and for the people who live in it, we have to honestly and aggressively attack the universities in this country.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong statement.
It is.
And with Trump back in the White House, Vance is his VP,
Right.
and maybe Devos back at the Department of Education, it's not looking good for academic freedom.
The bully pulpit.
Yeah.
That's what they call the presidency. It's a powerful tool.
Powerful.
And it's easy to see Trump using that power
Yeah.
to pressure universities into following his ideology.
Right.
We could see a return to McCarthyism.
Wow.
Professors investigated and blacklisted for their political beliefs.
And it's not just what's being said in classrooms.
No.
It's about what's being researched.
Right.
We could see them withhold funding from projects they consider politically sensitive or that go against their worldview.
Mm.
This could be devastating for scientific progress, especially in fields like climate change and public health,
Right.
where the research often clashes with conservative ideology.
It's a slippery slope.
It is.
You start limiting academic freedom in one area,
Yeah.
it gets easier to do it in others,
Yeah.
and the consequences could be terrible,
Yeah.
not just for higher education, but for society as a whole.
If we stifle the free exchange of ideas,
Right.
the pursuit of knowledge,
Yeah.
we stifle our own progress.
Absolutely.
We become a society that's afraid to question, afraid to challenge, afraid to think differently.
That's a recipe for stagnation,
Yeah.
decline.
It's pretty clear that a second Trump term presents a lot of challenges for American higher education.
Yeah.
But even with all the anxiety, there's also a sense of defiance,
Mm.
a determination to protect those core values:
Yeah.
academic freedom,
Right.
diversity, the pursuit of knowledge.
Yeah, it feels like we're at this crossroads,
Hmm.
where the ideals of higher education are about to clash with the political realities
Yeah.
of a second Trump term. And one place where that clash could be really intense is immigration policy.
Yeah, we've already seen how Trump's policies on immigration affected international students and scholars during his first term.
Yeah, absolutely. The travel bans, the stricter visa requirements, the whole rhetoric around immigration, it created this atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. Yeah.
It made the U.S. a less attractive place for international talent.
Right.
A lot of students and researchers just decided to go to other countries.
Yeah.
Countries that were more open, more supportive.
And it wasn't just about the practical difficulties. It was the message it sent.
Yeah.
It seemed like America was becoming more inward-looking, more isolationist, less engaged with the rest of the world.
And that has real consequences.
Yeah.
It hurts our reputation as a global leader in education and research. It makes it harder to attract the best people.
Yeah.
It weakens our ability to work together on global issues like climate change, pandemics, economic development.
So if those restrictive policies come back under a second Trump term,
Right.
what could that mean for American higher ed? Could we see even fewer international students enrolling? Could it lead to a brain drain of top researchers and scholars?
It's definitely possible. And
Yeah.
it's not just about the numbers.
It's about the diversity of thought and experience that international students and scholars bring to our campuses.
They enrich our classrooms, our research labs, our communities.
Absolutely. They make us a more dynamic and intellectually stimulating society.
It's about more than just the economic side of things.
Right.
It's about the cultural and intellectual vibrancy that comes from being a truly global society.
Exactly. And if we close ourselves off from the world,
Yeah.
we risk becoming insular,
Yeah.
stagnant
And ultimately less competitive.
in the long run.
We've talked about a lot in this deep dive.
We have.
From potential cuts to research funding to the chilling effect on academic freedom.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by how big these challenges are for higher education.
It can feel daunting, but universities have always been places of resistance, pushing boundaries, challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
They've survived political storms before,
Yeah.
and they'll survive this one.
It's not going to be easy, though.
No, it won't.
What can universities do to navigate this and come out stronger on the other side?
They need to hold on to their core values. Diversity,
Right.
inclusivity,
Yeah.
academic freedom, the pursuit of knowledge. These are the things that have made American higher education a model for the world.
And they can't give up on those values.
No matter what.
No matter the pressure.
They need to speak up for those values.
Yeah.
Fight for them.
Yeah.
Challenge any attempts to silence dissenting voices
Right.
or restrict academic inquiry.
But it's not enough to just defend what we have now.
No.
Universities need to be proactive.
Yeah.
They need to find new ways to connect with their communities,
Right.
show how valuable higher education is,
Yeah.
make the case for continued investment.
They need to tell their stories,
Yeah.
highlight the impact of their research,
Right.
showcase what their students and faculty are achieving.
Yeah.
They need to remind people why higher ed matters,
Mhm.
not just for personal success, but for the progress of society as a whole.
And they need to be creative.
Yeah.
Find new sources of funding and support.
Partnerships with industry,
Right.
philanthropy,
Yeah.
international collaboration,
It's about diversifying.
not just in terms of the student body and faculty,
Okay.
but also diversifying revenue streams and partnerships.
Universities need to become more entrepreneurial,
Yeah.
more adaptable.
More responsive to the changing world.
It's a call to action for everyone involved in higher education.
Yeah.
Leaders, faculty, students, anyone who believes in the power of education.
We need to stand up.
Yeah.
Speak out.
Fight for the future of higher education.
The stakes are too high to stay silent.
Well said. To our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you some insights into the challenges and opportunities facing American higher education in the years ahead. Remember, knowledge is power, and staying informed is crucial for creating the future we want.